15 years. It's been 15 long years since I last saw him. My father, the man I thought would always be there for us. I was just 12 when my dad left. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. He walked out one evening, leaving behind an empty chair at the dinner table and a house filled with questions. For weeks, I'd sit by the window, waiting for him to come back. My mom, though, she knew better. She'd sit at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, trying to shield me from her tears, but I could hear her crying every night. It wasn't just the pain of losing him. It was the silence that followed. No phone calls, no letters, no trace of him. Eventually, I stopped asking, and life moved on. Mom did everything she could to raise me alone. She worked 2 jobs, barely slept, but she always made sure I had what I needed. Looking back, I don't know how she did it. She was my rock, my entire world. And though we struggled, we made memories, little moments that still make me smile. Like the way she'd sneak home, leftover cake from the diner she worked at for my birthday, or the nights we'd stay up late watching old movies. But there was always a hole, a part of me that wondered, why wasn't I enough for him to stay? Fast forward to yesterday, my wedding day. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was marrying the man of my dreams, someone who loved me, who promised to never leave me the way my dad did. The music started playing, the guests stood, and Mom held my arm as we prepared to walk down the aisle. And that's when I saw him. At the back of the room, standing alone in a wrinkled suit, clutching a hat in his trembling hands. My heart stopped. My father. After all these years, there he was. Mom froze beside me, her grip on my arm tightening. "Not now," she whispered, her voice shaking. "This is your day. Don't let him ruin it." But he didn't care. He started walking toward us, his steps slow but deliberate. Every eye in the room turned to him. The whispers started. My mother's face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. When he reached me, he didn't smile. He didn't apologize. He just said, "Can I talk to you? Just for a moment before you go through with this." I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers. Where were you? Why now? But I was too stunned to say anything. Then he leaned closer and said, something that made my blood run cold. "There's something you need to know before it's too late. It's about your fiancé." I couldn't breathe. My father, the man who had abandoned us, was trying to warn me about the man I was about to marry. My mind raced. What could he possibly know? I glanced toward the altar. My fiancé stood there smiling at the crowd, completely oblivious. "What are you talking about?" I hissed, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's not who you think he is," Dad said, pulling out a worn folder from his jacket. His hands shook as he handed it to me. "Please, just look." I hesitated but opened it. Inside were old newspaper clippings, court records, photos, and a name I didn't recognize. But the face was unmistakable. My fiancé. One headline read, "Husband accused of poisoning wife in inheritance scheme." My knees went weak. The room spun. This couldn't be real. This man, the man I loved, the man I was about to marry, was accused of killing his first wife? "He changed his name," Dad continued, his voice breaking. "He disappeared after the trial. I thought I'd never see him again. But when I saw your wedding announcement, I had to come." Tears blurred my vision. My father, the man I thought had abandoned me, had come back to protect me. At that moment, my fiancé walked over. His smile faltered when he saw the folder in my hands. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tight. I held up the documents. "Tell me this isn't you," I said, my voice trembling. He froze, his face twitched. "I can explain," he started, but I didn't let him finish. "You poisoned her!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the silent room. "You killed her for money, and now you're trying it again, with me." The guests gasped. My mother grabbed my arm, her face a mix of shock and fury. My fiancé, or whoever he really was, didn't deny it. He just stood there, exposed, as the whispers grew louder. I turned to my father, my voice shaking. "How do I know this is true?" "I wish it weren't," he said softly. "But I couldn't let you make the same mistake." Not again. I didn't wait for an explanation. I tore the veil from my head and turned to the crowd. "This wedding is over," I said, my voice strong, though my heart was breaking. As I walked out of that venue, the weight of betrayal crushed me, but outside the cool air brought clarity. My father followed me, his face lined with guilt. "I know I hurt you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't expect you to forgive me," But I couldn't let him hurt you too. For the first time in years, I looked at him not with anger but with gratitude. Tears streamed down my face as I said, "You didn't ruin my life. You saved it." And for the first time in 15 years, I hugged my dad. For the soul, sometimes, the people we think have abandoned us come back when we need them the most. Love doesn't always follow a straight line, but when it's real, it finds a way to save us, just in time.